But they lit you up first, sir. Thank you, and the floor is yours for a moment.
All right, thank you. I guess this question's mostly for Jordan Peterson. Just to hopefully enlighten a bit more what you mean by God, do you think that if all humanity were to cease to exist, does God still exist?
I don't think I know how to answer that. It's just, the situation is too hypothetical. I mean, I can take a crack at some of it, but so human beings are characterized by consciousness and by self-consciousness, and the latter in particular seems to be something relatively unique. There's some vague evidence for self-consciousness of lower sorts in animals, but it's not very compelling. Some of them can recognize themselves in a mirror, but our self-consciousness is accompanied by elaborated imagistic and linguistic models of ourselves and that have been elaborated over large spans of time. There are lots of elements of being that would disappear if we disappeared. Now, and it isn't even obvious to what extent that's true, right? Because I don't really understand to what degree being itself is dependent on consciousness. Like the classic materialist Enlightenment view, which I would say is basically a 19th century view, something like that, is that if all consciousness was extinguished, the material substrate of the universe would continue unchanged. But I don't really buy that as an argument, because I think that the material substrate, I think that reality is I think that reality is an interaction between what we perceive of as the material substrate and consciousness itself. And so then when you destroy consciousness, you destroy reality. And what that leaves, I don't really understand, because it doesn't have any temporality in any obvious sense. It doesn't have any size in any obvious sense without the introduction of an invisible observer. So lots vanishes without human consciousness and self-consciousness. I don't know how to answer the question, does God vanish? Because that brings us back into the same problem that I was talking about earlier, is that it's not exactly easy to understand what people are talking about when they say God. You know, because when you ask the question, would God disappear? There's an assumption there that whatever God is understandable and boxable, like a simple concept, like a chair, and that we both share the same conception. And, you know, there's endless warnings in deep religious literature against assuming that you understand what that term means, or sometimes even for using the term. So that's the best I'm going to be able to do with that question.
Thank you.
Hey there. So my question is about something that Matt said, but